All right, so our fourth panel this afternoon is called The Faith Factor, the role of faith-based organizations in global development. Sounds amazing. And to introduce our panel this afternoon, we'll have Thomas Banchoff. He's the director of the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs at Georgetown University and associate professor in the Government Department and School of Foreign Service. He is the editor of Democracy and the New Religious Pluralism, published by Oxford University Press in 2007, in addition to several other works regarding religion and global politics. Please help me welcome Mr. Thomas Banchoff.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'd love to thank you all for coming out on this beautiful afternoon for what promises to be a very stimulating conversation. I'd especially like to welcome our panelists and thank them in advance for taking their time and sharing their insights with us today. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Catherine Marshall, who will introduce the panelists and moderate the conversation. As you know, the overall theme of the forum today is Profit, Policy, and Philanthropy, the Keys to Global Development. So much of what we have been covering on the preceding panels and over lunch relates to Georgetown's traditional concern with social justice and our long-standing commitment to engagement with the policy world. The issue of faith and development, our topic this afternoon, resonates deeply with Georgetown's identity as a Catholic and Jesuit institution. But it also links back to developments outside the academy, to the resilience and the resurgence of faith in the wider world, and its deepening intersections with culture, society, and politics in the United States and around the globe. Here, as we reflect, we will quickly see that the economic dimension is crucial and is poorly understood. In this time of economic crisis on a global scale, we need a better grasp of faith. Faith as a source of identity, of community, a source of ethical and action orientation. And we need a better understanding of the activities of faith-inspired organizations around challenges of poverty, equity, opportunity, and justice, where, as we will hear today, they are playing an increasingly vital role. We're very fortunate to have a distinguished panel and to have my colleague Catherine Marshall to serve as facilitator. A couple of words about Catherine. She joined the Berkeley Center in 2006, just as we were being created some 3 years ago as our first faculty member. She came to us from the World Bank, where she had a career of over 30 years in various leadership positions, including a tenure as counselor to the bank's president, Jim Wolfenson, on questions of faith, ethics, and development. Catherine is really one of the world's leading authorities in this emergent field, the author of many books, a couple of which are out there on the table and I can commend to you. One, A History of the World Bank, another on faith and development. In addition to leading the Berkeley Center's program on religion and global development, she's also the head of a path-breaking NGO, the World Phase Development Dialogue. So, thanks again for coming. I look forward to the discussion, and please join me in welcoming Catherine Marshall and our panel.
Good afternoon. In Georgetown, one of the subjects that seems to fire and excite students the most is international development, and more broadly, issues of social justice. International development has changed a great deal over the roughly 60 years since people started using the term and developing, and it's come from, in a sense, an idea of fairly clear recipes, fairly linear notion of progress, a fairly narrow vision of what constituted the good life. And it is today a very complex, subtle understanding of what we're trying to achieve. It is a rambunctious field with many controversies, many protests. But there are two very important points that I think echo what we've discussed earlier today. The first is that it's worth remembering that this is the first time in human history that we have had the real prospect of ending poverty and of changing people's lives, of offering each human being a life of dignity and development of their potential. And there is really, for the first time in human history, something approaching a moral commitment to achieve the potential, to achieve this dream of a world without poverty. So we have the moral commitment, but we have also the shadow of the complex link between security or insecurity, poverty and injustice and inequality. One of the characteristics of the development world is that partnerships have become vastly more complex. Public, private, instead of a few institutions that you could look at in the fingers of one hand, you now have hundreds of different kinds of institutions, which brings us to the central focus of today's panel, the faith factor. When I say that I work on religion and development, very often people's reaction is religion and development. What do those have to do with each other? And the answer is basically everything, from AIDS to zebras, sanitation, water, microfinance, faith-consistent investment strategies, climate change, war and peace, you name it. There's a faith dimension to every one of these issues. In some senses, faith preoccupations, the concern of major religions with poverty, injustice, exclusion, goes back thousands of years. But in terms of the practical intersection with the development world that I started talking about, it's really quite new. And it is still quite tentative and in some circles quite controversial. But it also offers a vast potential of mobilization, of service delivery, and of reflection on the complex ethical issues at stake. So to address that, we have a remarkable panel of people who are all among my leading heroes, I would say. You have the biographies of all of them, so I will give you a very brief introduction. And I want to start with what I guess is actually an empty chair, which was to be occupied by Hani el-Banna. And I want to mention him partly because we were concerned to have an interfaith perspective. He is an Egyptian doctor who is very much inspired by his Islamic principles. But I also thought I would mention why he could not be here. And that is because he is traveling frenetically around the Gulf and other places, preparing a crisis workshop in Khartoum on the Darfur situation. So he has sent his regrets.